It's always exciting to start a new series, and say we're starting a new series called Living Life Well. I am going to be giving you the key to living a good life and living life well. Now, I know I don't even have to ask. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. It's a rhetorical question because I know the answer. How many of us want to live life well? The answer for Christians is all of us. In fact, for most people, not definitely for all Christians, but even those who aren't Christians, we want to live life well. We want to be who God would have us to be. All you have to do, if you want to find the answer to living life well, is go to the bookstore, go to the self-help section, and there are millions and millions of books written by millions of authors that tell you how to live life well. In fact, a lot of them would fall under religious books, telling you, here's what you need to do to live life well. Probably the most popular was a book called Your Best Life Now. And it's the idea, and I didn't read the book, but the idea behind the book is that if you're positive and you think these good thoughts, then all of this will happen. And a lot of self-help gurus tell you that kind of thing. I don't know if you think about gurus like I do. It's the people who have the microphone like this, and they're all excited, and they're telling you all about how you can have your best life and how you need to do this kind of stuff. Well, in this series, during this week and the 6 weeks that will follow, I'm going to tell you the answer to living life well. This week, just out of curiosity, I Googled that, living life well, just to see what people were saying or what people would say, how we are called to live our life well. And one article that I looked at said that to live life well, that you have to travel more. And it seems like a pretty good idea. You know, if you want to live life well, you travel, you go to cities and you go to rural areas and you just travel more. And if you travel more, you will live life well. Another thing it said was to help others, which absolutely makes sense, kind of serving other people. And we're going to be talking about that in one of these weeks. How do we live life well? Well, service of others is one of the ways we do that. Slow down. This article said to slow down, and I can agree with that, right? I mean, a good part of life, or in my opinion, one of the ways that we can have a better life is to slow down. Sure, that's a good one. One that they said that I didn't really agree with, though. In fact, I'd been taught the total opposite from the time I was very little. Was this article said if we want to live life well, we need to talk to strangers, right? And when I was a kid, that was a big no-no. We were told, do not talk to strangers. But as I've grown, I've realized that, hey, a good part of life is getting to know people you don't know and talking to strangers. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I'll just kind of reveal the secret from the very beginning. The key to living life well, from my perspective, and I think also from a biblical perspective, has nothing to do with any of those things. The key to living life well is discipline. Now, that doesn't sound exciting, right? And most of you are like, man, I was really hoping for something else. How much longer till this is over? But let me get through this, and I hope you'll be able to see where I'm going with this. And the key to living life well as Christians and living out our Christian faith is discipline. Now, we see it in every aspect of life, right? Most of you, or at least a lot of you, watched college football yesterday. All of those athletes from very young age have been extremely disciplined to do what they do and to do it to the best of their abilities. They work out. They eat right, some of them. They do the best they can in every aspect of practice so that they can perform well on the field. The same is true in all aspects of our lives. If we're going to do what we need to do in our finances, then we have to be disciplined. We can't go out and buy stuff we can't afford if we're going to be do a good job with our finances. The same is true with our health. In every aspect of our life, if we're going to live life well, discipline is going to play a role. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, what in the world does this have to do with religion? What in the world does this have to do with Christianity? And most of you have heard the saying that Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. It's this idea that we go beyond these rules and things, and that we get to have a relationship with God. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to argue at least today and throughout these next few weeks, that for us to have a relationship with God, we need discipline. In fact, discipline helps us form a practical relationship with God. And so we're going to be talking about what that looks like and what that means for our life. But before we start that, I want to go all the way to the beginning. And in fact, I want to go even before the beginning. And we talk about God saving us and God, but before time began, before God created the universe, before God created the earth and everything in it, before God created mankind, God knew what He was going to do. And God knew about us. And God not only knew about us, God knew about each and every one of us individually. And God knew that He was going to save us. And God knew He had this plan from before time began that He was going to save us. In fact, in 2 Timothy 1:9 we read, God saved us and called us to a holy living, not because of our works, but because of His own purpose and grace, which He gave us in Christ Jesus before the ages began. And so what we read here from Paul as he writes to Timothy, he's saying that God wanted to save us before we even existed, not because we're good, not because God looked at you and said, you know what, he is going to be just such a great guy, or she's going to be such a wonderful mom. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this plan to save them. No, God looked at us and He shook His head and said, you know what, man, he's messed up. And I'm sure He said that about me. What was He thinking? What was going on in His mind when He decided to do that? No, God looks at us and He decided to save us before we were good, knowing that we weren't going to be good. He wanted to save us for His purpose and for His grace because He loved us. God prepared a way for our salvation. And it started all the way back in the Old Testament as He revealed this idea of saving a people to Abraham. And He passed it through Moses and then all of David and the prophets. And eventually, this idea of saving a people for His purpose, not because they're good, but for His purposes, was culminated in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. And so Jesus lived and died so that God's plan to save a people could be fulfilled. God became a person, someone that other people could look at and point to and listen to and even touch. He created a person that died and rose again to save you and me. Romans chapter 5 verse 17 says, for if because of one man's trespass death reigned through that one man, much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ. So God did all of this, saving us, working throughout history, culminating in the death and resurrection of Jesus to save us so that we might become righteous. So that when God looks at us, He doesn't see my sinfulness, though it's there. He sees me covered in the blood of Christ, that we might receive His grace in incredible abundance. Now, we use a Christianese word for this. It's called justification. It's a big word that simply means that because of Christ's death and because of His resurrection, that His blood, His righteousness is applied to mine, and so that when the judge looks at me and all of us who are in Christ, he sees not me and my sins, but he sees the blood of Christ. We're found not guilty. That's what justified means. We're found not guilty of our sins because the penalty for our sins fell on Jesus. Now, all of that is God's saving grace. And we use this idea of grace, this term for grace. Generally, when we're talking about the term grace, that's what we mean. That God did that. Though we didn't deserve it, all of us are sinful and all of us have fallen short of God's glory. So none of us deserve God's grace, but God did that because of His purpose and righteousness and goodness because He loved us. But, having said all that, which is the foundation of Christianity, but if that were the end of it, Christianity wouldn't be a relationship at all. It would simply be an awesome God who gives us grace, saving us from our sins, right? A relationship is more than that. So if the slogan, Christianity is not a religion, a relationship, is actually true, then there has to be something more to it than just God saving us from our sins. There has to be an aspect in which we play a part, right? Because a relationship cannot be one-sided. I don't know how many of you, raise your hand just so I can get an idea. How many of you know the show Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? Most of you. Good. So you understand what I'm saying when I say that he doesn't know it, but Chip Gaines is like my best friend, right? And he doesn't know me. I follow him on Twitter, and occasionally I'll say something to him on Twitter. He doesn't reply, but it's only because he's busy, right? If he actually knew me, we would be like super tight. I know this to be true, right? He doesn't know it because, and doesn't that sound ridiculous? I mean, I'm obviously, of course, it is true, but it sounds ridiculous, right? Because we know that relationships cannot be one-sided. Now, it might work out that if we ever got to meet, that we would actually hit it off. I do imagine that to be true because he's a nice guy, not because I am necessarily, but we can't know that because relationships can't be one-sided. We don't have a relationship. I know who He is. He doesn't know who I am, right? So we can't have a relationship because relationships can't be one-sided. And the same is true with our relationship with God. You see, yes, God's grace to save us is free. We can't earn it. There's nothing we can do to earn God's saving grace. But we absolutely must play a role if we're going to have a relationship with God. There is something in us having a relationship with God that we must do for the relationship to actually exist. You see, God's grace is not limited to saving us from our sins, though that is the incredible aspect of it. That is the foundation for who we are as Christians, right? But it's not just that. Grace is not just a way for us to get to heaven. There's also a day-to-day grace that God gives us for our good. Day-to-day, minute by minute, God's grace that is available to us so that we can live our lives well. Now, just to be clear, and this is where I think self-help gurus, this is where even some Christians who write about this kind of idea get confused. Because when I say live life well, I'm talking about from a godly perspective. God sees us living our life well in way different than we do, right? For the most part, if we were to talk to our culture about what does it look like for us to live a life well? What does a life well lived look like? They'll say things like, well, you've got a good job, right? Or you work really hard so that you can have a good job. You've got good health insurance. You've got a nice house. Maybe a life lived really well is one where you save a lot of money and you're able to buy a Corvette or whatever. And you don't know. So when we talk about in our culture this idea of a life well lived, it's those kind of things. We're talking about it in those kind of terms where we have a lot of stuff, or we have some nice stuff, or maybe we don't have to work hard. In fact, I would imagine that people who grew up during the World War II generation, their idea for their kids was for their kids to live life well, to not have to work as hard as them. And maybe some of you grew up in that age where your parents wanted your life to be not like theirs, where they had to work physically hard. They didn't want that for you. And so their idea for you to live life well was to not work so hard. Or maybe for us, it's to be comfortable. All of these kind of ideas is not what I'm talking about when I talk about, from a godly perspective, what it looks like to living life well. I think God wouldn't define it like that. I think He would define a life well lived as one connected to Him. As one who, in every aspect of their life, they're pursuing Him. They're trying to understand Him, understand our relationship to Him. But not only a life lived well isn't one that's just connected to God, but a life lived well is also one that's connected to others as well. In fact, I think probably, this is Jonathan, I think, moment. I think probably if we were to boil down this idea of what God would say a life well lived looks like, we would find the answer in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. The prophet says this: He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? And so here in this one verse, we see this kind of definition of God's definition, at least, of a life well lived. It's connected to people, and it's connected to people in that we're doing justice, we're loving kindness, but it's also connected to God in that we're humbly walking with Him. And so the idea of God's grace is a big picture thing, right? Where God's grace saves us, but it's also a day-to-day, moment by moment, where we're looking to God, turning to Him, hoping that He will guide us and navigate us, connected to Him, so that we can live our life well. If we want to have a relationship with God, if we want to be that walking humbly with God, to experience His grace daily and in practical ways, then we are called to walk with Him day by day, moment by moment. And if we're going to receive God's grace, God's gift of grace, of daily grace, then we must figure out a way. Remember, a relationship is two-sided. We must figure out a way to where we're connecting to Him, to where we're putting ourselves in the path of God's oncoming grace. Now, this first message, I'm kind of giving you kind of the what I want us to know, right? What I hope to get across to you in this first kind of introductory message to this series that we're going through. What I hope to get across to you in this message, and even beyond this as we go through it, is this. Is that too often Christians, instead of doing what it takes to live life well, we avoid it. We choose to go another direction. And it almost sounds counterintuitive, like, no, we want to live life well. There's no way I would avoid it. But I'm telling you that Christians, we turn and we run away from living life well, and we do it because we think that there's a better way. Only to find out that we thought the better way was just simply the easy way. And we take the easy way and we miss our best life because we wanted things to be easy. And we miss this because it's hard in the moment, right? And as I was thinking about this week, this idea of us avoiding hard things to choose the easy things, even though the hard way is actually the better way, the only thing that I could come to was my own personal exercise and eating lifestyle. So listen, this is just between us, right? This stays in here because this is really highly personal, right? So this is rhetorical. Please don't answer because this is embarrassing. So rhetorically, would it be better if I ate better? Well, yeah, of course it would be, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you are like me, and I know that that going to McDonald's is not good for me. But I also know it's fast, it's easy. I know that eating Chick-fil-A every single day is not a good idea, but it tastes so good. And I don't eat Chick-fil-A every day, by the way, but I would if I could. So don't judge me. But so I know that I, and not only just in what I eat, but I eat. So with the exception of a few things, I love to eat, right? And so when I eat, I don't just sit down and like eat a little bit, right? I like to eat, and so I'm like, if I get a little portion, it makes me feel good, but that doesn't mean anything because I just go back and get some more, right? So I love to eat, and I also don't like to exercise. When I was young, I was always outside. We were always playing football or baseball or something. And so I didn't really exercise, but I did because it wasn't structured. It was just something that we did. And this was, eventually when I was about 13 or so, we got a Nintendo. But before that, there was no such thing as video games in our house. So we just always went outside. So I was always exercising. But when it comes to structured exercise, where I have to make a choice to get up and do something, and I can do it for periods of time. In fact, I was telling one of the guys yesterday that when I get up early in the morning, it makes me feel good and I'm glad, but I don't like doing it. So I don't do it. And so I don't eat well and I don't exercise very well. You know why? Because I don't like doing it. It's hard. It's not fun for me. It's hard work. And so I avoid what I know in deep down, and not even deep down, even surface level. I know that my life would be better if I did a couple simple things. If I chose to eat better and if I chose to exercise more. But I don't do it because it's a harder path. Now, I'm so proud of some of these ladies, and I'm not going to mention any names, but they've been working out, and they put it on Facebook, and they say, this is how many days in a row or whatever, and we've lost this many pounds. And what they're doing is great, but it also makes me feel terrible. But you know what? I'm so proud of them. I'm not going to say anything. I really am proud. I don't really feel terrible because you know what? I don't want to do it. It's hard work. And so, and I say all of that because I think it's a decent, it's not perfect, but it's a decent explanation of us as Christians and our relationship with God. See, our lives would be better if we chose to do hard things, but we don't because they're hard. And that's why Paul told his young friend Timothy, train yourself. He said to train yourself. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7, he says, have nothing to do with irreverent silliness. Rather, train yourself for godliness. And so what Paul is saying, and there was obviously some silly thing that was going on in their church at the time, and he's saying, look, don't worry about those silly things. Train yourself for godliness. What Paul is telling Timothy and what he's telling us kind of by proxy, I guess, is that look, godliness is not just something that's going to happen. Right? You're not going to say, you know what, I've decided to become a Christian, and all of a sudden, all people see is like your halo and your white robe, and everything, your life's perfect. No, you have to train yourself for godliness. It's difficult. It takes discipline. Don't get caught up in stuff that don't matter. Train yourself for godliness. And Paul would tell us the same thing. You want to be like Jesus? I don't know any Christian who would say no. In fact, that's what a Christian is, a little kind of miniature Christ. If we're going to be like Christ, then we need to train ourselves. And if it sounds like hard work, it's because sometimes it can be. It takes discipline. And I think so many Christians aren't where they would like to be in their relationship with God because we choose the easy path. What we think is the easy path. What we don't realize is that when we don't, like me, not eating right or not exercising, it's actually harder to do that than it is to actually eat right and exercise. Now, in the moment, it's maybe more difficult. Well, the same is true when we train ourselves in godliness. It makes our life easier. It makes our life better. It makes us live our life well when we do that. And that's harder in the moment. It takes effort. When I was a young kid, my favorite, now I don't know how many of you will know this. I know at least Russ will and Doug and some others. But my favorite baseball player was Ricky Henderson. Now, Ricky Henderson had a terrible attitude, but at the time, I was like 12. I didn't care. I just knew that Ricky Henderson could run fast and he could hit the ball far. And I wanted to be like Ricky Henderson. And so I would even try to bat like him. And I tried to look like him because I wanted to be like him. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't go to the cage for extra workouts, right? I didn't get somebody stop watching me so I could do more sprints. I didn't train the way I needed to train. If I was now, obviously, genetics plays a part in that, right? I mean, but there was a point where I could have been better than I was if I would have simply trained like I needed to train. And I didn't do it because it's more difficult. Well, if we're going to be like Jesus, we've got to train ourselves. If we're going to live life well, and I define living life well, like for us as Christians, is being as much like Jesus as possible. If we're going to live life well, if we're going to be like Jesus, then we're going to have to do what it takes. If we're going to get the day-to-day grace of God, we're going to have to do what it takes to train ourselves to be like Him. We've got work to do. Each and every one of us has work to do. In fact, this work never ends. Just like if you're going to be physically fit, you can't just stop like you've reached 50 or whatever and okay, now you're good. No, the same is true in our walk with Christ. We have to make every effort to put ourselves in the path of God's oncoming daily grace. If you have your Bibles, I'm going to read to you a story that I think you're familiar with in Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. If you don't have a Bible, if you didn't bring one with you, that's fine. Grab one of those in the pew in front of you, one of those black ones. It's going to be on page 878 there in the Pew Bible. And if you don't own a Bible, we would love for you to take one of those home with you today as a gift from Snellville Christian Church. Now, this passage of Scripture, this account is of a man named Zacchaeus. And most of you heard about Zacchaeus, those of you who went to church as young kids, and you learned about Zacchaeus through the song, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he, right? He climbed up in a sycamore tree, right, for the Lord he wanted to see, right? That's the story, and I don't even have to read it now. I just told you. That's pretty much it, right? But let's read this of Zacchaeus, and then we'll talk about it just for a little bit. Luke chapter 19, starting in verse 1. He entered Jericho, and this is talking about Jesus. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small of stature. So he ran ahead, and he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and he said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried, and he came down, and he received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. They're talking about Jesus, he has gone into the house to be a guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. And so what we read about Zacchaeus here, first, Zacchaeus is a tax collector, and he had defrauded people. There's no doubt. Zacchaeus says, if I have. There's no doubt tax collectors made their money by defrauding people in this time. And so, not just this time, I think it probably still happens today too. That's a whole other story. I didn't mean to get a sidetrack, right? And so Zacchaeus was a tax collector who made his money, made his living by basically stealing from other people. And so he gave back all his money, and God says, or Jesus, who is God, says that you are saved today. Today, salvation has come upon you for the Son of Man. He's talking about himself. For I have come to seek and to save the lost. And so we know Zacchaeus is lost. He received the grace of God that day. Why? Because Zacchaeus did whatever it took to get into the path of God's oncoming grace. And I think as Christians, we miss this. Because we think about God's salvation act, right? So we become Christians, and so we become saved, and then we kind of do our own thing. But we forget that there's an aspect of this relationship where God's grace is available to us daily. All we have to do is find a way to get in the path of God's oncoming daily grace. So how do we do that? How do we do that? How can we get in the path of God's grace so that we can live our lives well, to make us more like Jesus? Well, we do that with discipline. We do that by training ourselves in godliness. Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29 and 30. "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so Jesus is talking about a yoke, right? You know what I'm talking about, that you kind of get the picture of this, like a couple of oxen where they pair them together, so they put this thing on their shoulders, right? And a yoke means work. And Jesus is saying, look, there's going to be some work involved here. I need you to put on this yoke. My work, it's going to be work. But my work is easy, my burden is light. And so a yoke that signifies this hard work, Jesus says this hard work is easy and light. How can that be? It almost doesn't make sense. Well, the way of Jesus, the way Jesus' yoke can be easy, the way His burden can be light is through discipline and through training. The secret to being like Jesus isn't to say, you know what, I'm going to be like Jesus, and so from now on, every time that something comes my way, I'm just going to look at my WWJD bracelet and I'm going to say, what would Jesus do? And I'll do it. Now that's a good thought, right? But that's not how we live our lives like Jesus. The way to live our lives like Jesus is not to think that we're going to act like Jesus in the moment. It's to train ourselves to be like Jesus so that when the moment comes, we're already prepared. It's kind of like when you're tempted, right? And I don't know what your struggles are. Everybody's are different. There are some big ones, obviously. But for the most of us, we have the same ones. I may not struggle in what you struggle with, but we both struggle in the same way in this, that the same issues that we had 2 months ago, we still have today. And the same issue that we had 2 years ago, maybe not to the same degree, but we still struggle with today. And we can't get to the point where we're saying, in that moment, when that thing comes, I'm just going to be like Jesus. No, we have to prepare ourselves ahead of time so that we can be like Him in the moment. The secret to be like Jesus daily, to daily get the grace of God, is to prepare that moment through training and spiritual disciplines. It's the same way we live our lives like Christ. It's the same way that exercise eventually gets easier and easier. So it's because that when we do it, we're prepared, we're ready. The same is true with us, training ourselves for spiritual, in the spiritual disciplines for the godliness, for grace of God. It's daily putting yourself in a position to come into contact with God's oncoming grace. Now, I don't know how, and I've already used my sports illustrations allotment. I haven't been keeping count, but I think once you go over 3, it's like I get fined or something, but I'm going to do this one anyway. It's kind of like in basketball, right? So I'm a Kentucky fan, and basketball is what people think about. So it's kind of like hitting the last second shot, right? And all of us, if I were to say to you, okay, we got a basketball game today, the game is tied, there's 2 seconds left, you're going to take the last second shot. The odds of any of us hitting that last second shot are pretty remote because we haven't been training for it, right? Even the athletes who play day in and day out, they train for that. These guys are already good. Why do they practice? Well, because they have to continually train. They're not going to hit the last second shot if they don't train for it. The same way is true for us in our lives. We're not going to be prepared to be like Jesus in a moment if we haven't been preparing to be like Jesus all of our lives. And all of us know people who intend on doing the right thing. Right? All of us know people who think, yeah, I'm going to be smart financially this year. This is why we make New Year's resolutions, right? I'm going to do this thing this year. And I'm going to just kind of decide, and that's just the way it's going to be. We know people who think, I'm going to do what's right with my health, or I'm going to do what's right in my marriage, but they fail to do it when a moment of temptation comes because they haven't been preparing to do what's right the entire time. It's not that they lack desire to do what's right. It's not that they just said, I'm not going to do it. It's because they haven't trained themselves to do the right thing through discipline. And the same is true with our relationship with Jesus. When we aren't training ourselves daily, when we aren't getting ourselves into the oncoming path of God's grace, it's difficult for us as Christians to look like Christ when we aren't prepared to do so. And so often we look at this Christian life and we kind of see this heavy yoke, like, man, that's a huge burden. Like, I gotta do right, and I gotta live right, I gotta do these things. And it's all because we avoid the discipline, the daily discipline that it takes to make this Christian life easy, to make Christ's yoke like. This week, I already mentioned that we went to Texas and we worked like crazy, and there was 4 of us from the church that went: Aaron Maffo, Dennis Bass, Scott Melman, and myself. And Aaron and Dennis partnered up on a team. Scott was kind of on his own, kind of going behind us, fixing our mistakes and doing the mud. And I partnered up with another guy from there, and he was older than me, and so basically he and I would carry this 4x8, isn't that what they are, 4x8 sheetrock, and we would pick it up and we would cut it and measure it, whatever. Sometimes we'd do a whole sheet and we'd take it and we'd do it, and he would hold his side and I would hold my side, but not just hold my side. I would also shoot the screws in, and then I would go to his side, shoot, and then I would get on my knees and shoot the screws in down there. I don't even want to do it. My legs are they're like, no, quit. And so by the end of these 2 days of working, not that guy wasn't working hard, he was, but he didn't do the amount of squats I did. My legs were screaming. My legs were like, please do not take another step. And in fact, Monday when I walked into the office, I was like this. I was like, oh. And Emmy, my daughter, she made fun of me whatever day it was, I can't remember, but I got off the couch and I was like, I took all I had to get off the couch because my legs were dead from all the work. It's because I haven't been working out. It's because I haven't been doing what it takes to prepare my legs to do that kind of work. And the same is true in our Christian lives. We think we're going to get to that moment and be able to handle it, but we can't. And so this series, this Living Life Well, this series is a call to training ourselves in spiritual disciplines. It's a call to training in spiritual discipline. You want to have a good life? You want to live life well? And I would imagine the answer for all of us is yes. You want to live a life that God is pleased with? You want to live life well? Then you need to be disciplined in the things of Christ. I already read 1 Timothy 4:7. Here's 1 Timothy 4:8. Paul says this, "For while bodily training is of some value in every way, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the time to come." Paul would say, look, it's good that you work out. It's good that you eat right. It's good that you do those exercises. Those things are good. It's going to impact your life in a lot of ways. It's going to be good. But godliness goes beyond that. Godliness is not only impactful in this life, but it's impactful in the life to come. And so if we're going to only pick one, and I don't know Paul just saying this is me putting my own emphasis on it. If you're only going to pick one, choose training in godliness. And to that I say, amen. Let's eat, But Paul says, look, train. By all means, train. But training in godliness is what matters. And so if we're going to live the life that God has called us to, if we're going to be the church that God has called us to be, if we're going to live life well, then we have got to be training in godliness. And so my hope is that in these upcoming weeks, the next 6 weeks after today, is that we will be looking at, hopefully, and be doing some practical things, looking at some practical areas that you can take with you to begin training. And I know some of you already do this. You're like if godliness were a bodybuilding contest, you would be the ones, you would be like old-time Arnold Schwarzenegger flexing. Some of you are already there, right? And you already know that you got to keep doing it. But for the most of us, we have work to do. And so as we go through this series, I'm hoping that we can have some practical things, something that you can put your hands on and be tangible with and move forward so that we can begin daily living the life of Christ, putting ourselves in the path of God's oncoming grace. And what we're going to be doing is building up those spiritual muscles. But that's only the side effect. That's not the goal. This is the true purpose, the true goal of spiritual discipline is not to build up spiritual muscles. The true purpose in spiritual disciplines is getting to know Jesus more fully and to love Him all the more. And so these are the things that disciples of Jesus will do as we talk about these things. If you're a Christian, you're a disciple, you're a follower of Jesus. And so these next few weeks as we go through some of these things are things that followers of Jesus are called to do. It's prayer, it's worship, it's study. There's going to be 6 of them altogether. It really, honestly, from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't really sound that exciting. It's like Here's some things that we need to work on. Here's some disciplines. But it's absolutely what we need to do if we're going to live life well. God did His part in saving us. God continues to do His part in offering grace for each and every moment. Are we doing our part for the relationship? Are we doing what we're called to do to have our best relationship with Him? Are we doing what we need to do to live life well? In a moment, we're going to sing a song, and my prayer is that you'll think about these things, that you'll maybe start this week starting to kind of figure out in your life, in your own minds, what your life should look like as it relates to these kind of things. What do you need to work on personally? Maybe for you it's some specific things that you can get a handle on, but for some of you, you're not even Christians yet. You're not even really a disciple of Jesus. You're not a follower. You haven't given your life. If you want to do that, then during this song, I would pray that you would think about the things you need to work on, Christians. Or if you're not a Christian, then you would come talk to me, and I would love to tell you what it looks like to give your life fully so that you can begin taking those steps to get yourself in the path of God's oncoming grace. So let's pray. God, thank you so much for loving us. You're an awesome God who gives us grace, not just to save us, but so that daily we can connect with you. And I'm so thankful, Father, for your love and for your goodness, for your word. Father, I pray that we as Christians would look for ways to continue training ourselves in godliness so that we can know you more. Father, I pray for those who haven't yet committed to giving themselves, that they would do that either today or soon, that they would come to that realization that their sins keep them from you, and that you, through Christ, are the only way that we can be saved. It's in Jesus' name that I pray.